Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be joining us from, and welcome to today's CodeRage, or this week's CodeRage series on Rad Server, DataSnap, and client-server technologies. This is Jim McKeeth. I'll be your host, along with Al Mannarino. Today we have a roundtable, a panel, although I said roundtable, and now I've organized everybody's names into rectangles. So imagine all these names in a circle here, because this is a roundtable discussion conversation where we can answer your questions and have conversations about the topics that are interesting to you related to client-server technology. So I'll go ahead and start with Felix. You want to introduce yourself really quick?
Hello, everybody. I'm writing Delphi since version 1, and I'm doing development in Delphi for customers and also some training. That's about it.
Yeah, Felix, one of our amazing MVPs. Thanks, Felix. And Danny, I just actually got to meet Danny for the first time a couple weeks ago in Belgium.
And that's a perfect country to meet each other because they've got great beer. So everybody in all over the world, head over to Belgium. My name is Danny Wind, and I'm a Delphi MVP in the Netherlands and the surrounding countries. I do some work as well. And in these sessions on Rad Server, I thought it'd be nice to have some simple solution for a key value server. So that's what I created, and feel free to use that source code. And that's about it.
Yeah, I found out Belgium's really all about the chocolate and the beer, so great reasons to visit, I guess.
It is.
And Malcolm, real quick, introduce yourself.
Well, sorry, you distracted me with chocolate and beer. I'm still thinking about that. Malcolm Groves, I'm an MVP based in Sydney, Australia. I guess like a lot of us, been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will share the story again, just because it's a. I was just telling Malcolm before they started that the very first BoreCon I went to, he was presenting a pre-conference tutorial, and it was great, and I learned a lot and thought he was amazing. And I ran into him in the computer lab, because this is back before we all had laptops. We had to go in the computer lab to use the computers to do email and stuff. And I was chatting with him about some of the stuff I was doing. He's like, you should do a session. You should submit a session next year. And I did, and look at me now. You can't shut me up. So blame Malcolm.
Yeah, so just a global apology should go out from me, I think, at this point. Everybody, I'm really sorry. This is all my fault.
Yeah. And then, of course, Al Mannarino's on here with me as well. Al, there you are.
Greetings to all. So my name's Al Mannarino. I'm one of the Embarcadero software consultants. So I'm here to help the customers and the prospects be successful with Delphi and or C++ Builder or our Interbase database. So I'm here to help.
All right. So these are some of the videos, there we go, on the playlist. So you should have all had an email with this playlist on YouTube in it. If not, I will paste it here in the YouTube channel here really quick, or the chat box really quick, so you'll have it if you missed it. So make sure if you haven't watched these videos, go back and watch them again, because there's a lot of great content here. But we'll just go through and everybody can talk real quick about their video that they put in. And if you have any questions out there in the audience, go ahead and put those questions in the question panel here around these videos or these topics, and we will do our best to answer them for you, or at least have an interesting conversation about the topic. So actually, Danny, you mentioned you're on a key value store. So why is a key value store useful? Why has you decided that you want to do a set forced videos on building a key value store and working with that?
Well, it's a very universal solution. I've actually used or maybe abused key value stores for just about anything, even lottery tickets, because a key value store, you just store a value next to a key. I've used it for images, I've used it for files, PDFs, reports, just about anything. And creating a key value store, although it's very simple to do, even without Rad Server, but with Rad Server it's even easier. It's a very valuable resource to have.
Yeah, it's a great resource. So, and actually, I like this because you broke it down into different parts here. People can get into building the server side if they're like, hey, I just want to understand that, or I just want to understand deploying the package to IIS or whatever. They can just go in and grab that individual part there. So, great overview of Rad Server and building all the different parts and building a key value store. So. That is certainly a great resource there.
This and the basic
authentication. I don't have your video on here. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Nope.
Go ahead, Danny. Go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to add to the basic authentication authorization. That's the built-in part in IIS. But the OAuth thing, that's actually covered by Felix Garipi's session. So that's the session at the bottom. So if you want to know more about OAuth instead of using basic authentication, you should take a look at that session.
Yeah. Okay, I know Malcolm's session's on here. There it is, using enterprise connectors. I just don't have it on the slide here for some reason.
Does that mean I can go back to bed?
What? It's time to wake up for you, isn't it?
I guess so.
All right, so Malcolm, you talked about using enterprise connectors, which I am a huge fan of enterprise connectors as well. It's one of those things I was actually a little slow on the uptake for, but came around to it. So tell us real quick about using enterprise connectors, Malcolm, and why you wanted to do a session on that.
Well, I mean, I wanted to do a session on enterprise connectors because like you, I've become a real fan of them. I mean, Delphi has really great REST client support. So you can talk off to all sorts of things, like Felix's session on this list on Dropbox. You can, most of these services these days have REST APIs you can talk to. So Delphi has got great support for that. But for each of them, their APIs are different. You've got to go through and learn all of it. Enterprise Connector's approach of just making it all look like relational databases and letting you throw SQL at them using the FIDAC components you already know is just such a productivity boost. So that's kind of why I wanted to do it. But what I really focused on was what I find most people have trouble with, which is the actual connection. Once they're connected, it's just SQL. So they're usually pretty good to go. But actually getting the connection, working out where their OAuth tokens being stored, changing the consent screen that pops up in front of their customer so it actually has their application name, all of those sorts of things. Kind of the way I thought of it was taking the connection part from demo level to actual deployable application level. That was kind of what I tried to focus on.
Yeah, that's one of the tricky things, honestly, in making demos is, making something that's simple enough to be understood, but also that's not so simple that it's completely useless to actually to learn from. So, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and the as it was, I spent, I cut my thing down. I spent 25 minutes just talking about the connection. So if this was a normal session on enterprise connectors, I wouldn't have left much time to do anything else. So it was kind of good just to focus on that separately.
So now, in your video, did you cover like specific connections, or did you just talk about connections in general, or what? How did you deal with that? Because the thing I found with enterprise connectors is each one you have to go and find out how they want you to, what kind of key you need or whatever to connect to them.
Yeah, that is the trick. So what I tried to walk the line between them. I don't know how successfully. I did at the beginning. I did show how whereabouts in the documentation to look for each driver to see how to connect, because it's kind of in the same spot for each driver's documentation. There's the same section on how do I connect. But as you said, each one of these is going to be different. So in the end, I just tried to choose most, the majority of them are OAuth. And so I just tried to pick one that I thought would be pretty common, which ended up being a Google one. So I ended up using Google Sheets, but it should be the same for Google Drive and a bunch of other Google sort of services.
The Google Sheets enterprise connector is phenomenally useful.
Yeah.
Because it lets you treat a spreadsheet like a table and just add whatever columns you want and whatever rows you want and just do queries on it. And So useful.
Well, to be honest, every enterprise and I could turn this into a session just about how awesome enterprise connectors are, but every enterprise connector that I've used, at the end of it, I come away going, oh, that's the awesome one. That's the great one. And then I'll use another one and go, oh, that was the awesome one. So,
Okay.
you know, they're all just good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess asking you which one's your favorite would be a pointless endeavor at this point, then, from what that sounds like.
Yeah, choosing between my children. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but so actually, it's great that you did the session, because just in 10.3.3, we started including enterprise connectors in the enterprise and architect editions of Delphi, C++ Builder, and Rad Studio. Everybody that has enterprise or architect gets the enterprise connectors along with Linux targets and Rad Server and everything else we're talking about here today. So that is just fits in perfectly. And you notice I actually updated the slide real quick, so now I have your using enterprise connectors with Malcolm Groves on there. So
So I've got to stay up.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I guess Dan or Al, you're up next. So you did hit the ground running with ready-made Rad Server and building a multi-tier solution from the ground up with DataSnap.
That's correct. So basically, I put two videos together on pretty much, how to get started, either using DataSnap or Rad Server. So with, as many of you know, with Delphi and or C++ Builder, you have different choices for backend technologies to build scalable, fault-tolerant backends on premises or in the cloud. So with Delphi and or C++ Builder, you have three main backend technology choices. Those are Web Broker, DataSnap, or Rad Server. So with Rad Server, which we also call EMS, DataSnap, and Web Broker, these are all middle-tier servers that you can use to build and deploy either with Delphi or C++ Builder. So they have a number of characteristics that are in common. But however, when you start working with them, you see they are significantly different from the standpoint of how they work and how they are accessed by client applications. So like, for example, for DataSnap, for me, DataSnap is very good for making systems where both the client and the server parts are written in one language, either Delphi or C++, and they use their own proprietary protocol to effectively transfer not pure data, but classes or complex language structures. So for example, a good use of DataSnap is, let's say you're using an ADO table or a FireDAC table on the DataSnap server side, and then the clients, they get the data transferred directly in the form of a Delphi or C++ data set. So that's a nice good use of DataSnap that way. And Rad Server, on the other hand, is pretty much a pre-built out-of-the-box REST server where you can reuse all of your existing Delphi or C++ Builder functions and methods and have Rad Server automatically expose them out as manageable REST endpoints. And then any type of front-end REST client, whether it's a Delphi or C++ Builder VCL or multi-device FireMonkey client or JavaScript client or any type of JavaScript client, can connect to that Rad Server, access those functions, access those methods, access those data modules, and return JSON data back to the calling clients. So from these two videos, I did a quick use on how you use the Rad Server wizards or the DataSnap wizards to rapidly create the backend server, and then some options on how you can create the front-end clients to connect to those backend servers, call the functions, call the methods, and return data back to the client.
There's a question here, Al. What is the performance? How does DataSnap's performance work, or how good is its performance, and how many users can it handle?
That's always a good question, So I've seen, let's say, as far as performance and concurrent clients, so I've seen, let's say, DataSnap use, 1,000 concurrent client connections. But the basic question comes down to what are you doing and what do you need to do? So in the real world, you really need to perform some realistic load tests, because sometimes it's not the backend server, DataSnap or Rad Server, that's the bottleneck. Sometimes it's the database that's the bottleneck.
Yeah, and exactly. It comes down to how you manage your connections, whether you're persistent connections and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that can go in there. But what's the have you seen very performant solutions with DataSnap, and how big of deployments, for example, have you seen?
So I mentioned we know of customers that are using DataSnap for up to 1,000 concurrent client connections. So the DataSnap server has a property called lifecycle, where you can either set it to invocation, server, or session. So based on the needs, that lifecycle kind of controls, how many concurrent client connections can be handled by your, let's say, backend DataSnap server, versus Rad Server that's completely stateless, just sitting out there in a stateless mode, waiting for front-end clients to connect to it, call the functions, call the methods, and return back JSON objects. So there's no state there. And DataSnap can do the same thing. So if I recall, DataSnap, if you set the lifecycle to invocation, then it becomes the stateless server, similar to how Rad Server works. Yeah.
So actually, let's go ahead and go to Felix. Your session was on the OAuth Dropbox. Real quick, you want to give us just a quick overview of your session there?
Yes, I basically wanted to see how OAuth 2 was working. So I first looked at on Google to understand the protocol. And then after that, I saw that the REST demo from Embarcadero had a Dropbox client. So I first used this one. And after that, I tried to make the calls to get the token and then upload or download files. Then once I understood that part, I tried to get some logs to see really what was exchanged between the client and the Dropbox server. So I used Indy with logging and did just the same thing, with mainly, first of all, the dialogue to get the token, and then to upload or download files. So that's about it.
Wow, that actually sounds really useful, because you kind of get in there and break it down and see what it all works. That's the kind of thing I love, because I like knowing what's going on behind the scenes, right? I want to be productive and get things done, which is one of the things I love about Delphi, right? Is that we can work at this nice high level of abstraction and be really productive, but when we need to, we can reach down there behind the scenes and understand all the details and call API calls and allocate memory and whatever we want to do. So fantastic. I definitely have to go check that one out more. That sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's very useful, because I'm thinking when Malcolm was talking about his enterprise connectors, there's some of those backend services that need OAuth 2 authentication. So it's good to know how to use OAuth 2 authentication to connect to these backend services.
Yeah, it's important.
I must tell that I only did the client part. I didn't dare so far to try the server part, but maybe that's coming next.
I'm trying to think. Is it Facebook or no? One of those backend services. It might be Facebook or it might be Twitter that needs the OAuth 2 authentication. So again, it's good to know how to do OAuth 2 authentication to be able to connect to some of these backend services that need it.
Yep. So Al, here's a question for you. You mentioned, so you have videos here on DataSnap and Rad Server, but you also mentioned WebBroker. Is WebBroker a RESTful server, or what kind of server middle tier solution is that? You still there?
I'm here if you can hear me.
Yep.
So WebBroker is one of the 3 technologies in Delphi or C++ Builder to build these middle tier solutions. So So web broker is the most simplest and generic. It's more of a web server development framework in Delphi or C++ Builder. So think of it as a web server, not a REST server. And it's interesting to know that web broker is really the underlying technology for many of the web service types that you can build with Delphi and or C++ Builder, including SOAP, XML web services, and even DataSnap. So for example, there's a new web broker app wizard that you can use to create a new web server app, and you can implement it with HTTP server functionality. So for me, web broker is good for simple HTTP server functionality, but the more complex the system you want to build, the more you need to look at using Delphi or C++ Builder's multi-frameworks, such as DataSnap and or Rad Server. Because DataSnap and Rad Server provide much more higher level functionality that you can find in web broker. So web broker, think of web broker as a generic web server development technology, versus DataSnap and Rad Server are more for middle tier technologies.
Yeah, and actually a lot of you mentioned that the SOAP and some other frameworks are built on top of web broker. A lot of the third-party open source ones, for example, are built on top of web broker. So a lot of those other solutions that are out there for RESTful services are built on top of web broker. So you can certainly build a REST service with web broker, but it's not specifically designed around that. It's the low-level building block that everything else is based on. So, and I guess to a degree, you kind of build up, right? So web broker is the simplest. Well, I guess Indy, right? We could just use regular sockets, right? We could just open some sockets and send stuff. And then you have web brokers, kind of the low-level server technology, and then DataSnap is a toolkit for building multi-tier solutions, and then Rad Server's the turnkey, ready-to-go solution.
So if you look at the DataSnap video I did, I used the DataSnap web broker application wizard, because for me, for building DataSnap backends for applications, that DataSnap web broker application wizard is the most useful, because it lets you use both DataSnap technology and web broker technology with that wizard to build your middle tier layer.
Yeah. Yep. So there's a question here about Rad Server and OAuth 2. It says, how can we build OAuth 2 security into Rad Server so that clients log into a service securely? So, and Felix, maybe you can expound on this, but my understanding of OAuth 2 is it's useful for like a federated login, if you will, where like, for example, is I have a Google account and I want to give a third-party website access to my Google account, but I don't want to give them my Google password, right? So it's where you have a trusted third party, essentially. And so instead of giving, let's say Al's made a great web service, instead of giving Al my Google username and password, instead, Al gives me a link that I log into Google with, and then it returns a token back to Al, so that Al then has access, limited access, controlled access to my Google account, and then I can actually then go and revoke it as well. So I don't know if that makes sense for Rad Server. Felix, what do you think? Is that an accurate description of how OAuth 2 works, and does that make sense for a Rad Server login situation?
Well, for OAuth 2, that's totally correct. But I must confess I'm not very familiar with Rad Server, so I cannot answer on this point.
Well, I would say for either Rad Server or for DataSnap. So we know DataSnap supports authentication and authorization, where you can plug in your own authentication and authorization. So if you can add the OAuth 2 authentication and authorization, then you can control access to certain server classes or methods that can be restricted to certain groups of users. So that's a good use of using DataSnap or Rad Server's authentication and authorization support to allow you to restrict access to certain classes or certain methods or based on certain group of users.
Jim, I don't, it's early in the morning here, so I don't want to pick a fight this early, but I really disagree with you. Actually, I'd love Rad Server to act as an OAuth 2 server, so that we've had projects where we were using Rad Server where we were building this backend for a customer. They also had we were also building mobile clients and desktop clients for them. And they really wanted those clients to authenticate, or the users, the customers using those clients to authenticate with Rad Server using the same OAuth 2 process that they do with Google or with Facebook or with Twitter.
Okay, so where they would use, so they would use authenticate with Rad Server using their Google credentials. Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
no, not using their Google credentials. So let's say this customer is Acme. Yep. So they've got Rad Server running on their servers and they're providing some application through Rad Server. They want their customers to be able to authenticate to use the mobile app or whatever using their Acme credentials. So it's still the same scenario, but then it's not Google's. You're not using Google's credentials. You're using your company credentials as you said, in a kind of a federated way or whatever.
Now, doesn't Rad Server offer, because like a single sign-on type thing, right? Where instead of having a separate username and password for Rad Server, it would instead be like Acme domain username and password for the users.
Yeah, you can, as Al was just saying, you've kind of got this pluggable authentication. So you can do that, but sort of the step that I think would be a great addition, and I've hassled people about this before, but I'm one voice amongst many.
Would be adding Malcolm. Yes, I've heard also customer requests asking for OAuth 2 authentication inside of Rad Server. So we'll definitely let our product managers know about this, and hopefully it can be added as a feature into the product.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it would be great.
Yeah, that's okay. So I think I understand what you're saying, and so I appreciate you correcting me. I don't claim to have all the answers by any means. So yeah, that does
just most of them. Just most of them.
So Alf is asking about two-factor authentication. Is there support around two-factor authentication in addition to, for example, adding OAuth? And Peter said that yes, absolutely, we need OAuth 2 for Rad Server. So, all right. So Al, we will follow up with product manager after this and let them know that I was wrong. Everybody else says it's important. But what about two-factor authentication? Has anybody done any work with two-factor authentication, or have any thoughts about how you'd use that with Rad Server or DataSnap? So I believe I'm a big fan of two-factor authentication. I use it a lot. And I believe, let me look here, I think there was a session at CodeRage a couple of years ago on this. So I'm going to go look for that really quick. So, but the idea behind two-factor authentication is where, for those that aren't familiar with it, is where you use your so your username is something everybody knows, right? Your password is something only you know. It's a secret that only you know. But then two-factor authentication requires you to have a physical token of some sort. So it's a physical device that you have, and so then it requires the know and the have, right? So it's not just a key, right? So you can lose your key and somebody else can grab it and open the door, but it's a key and a password. And so used to be people that have these things in their key rings that were the RSA token generators, and every 30 seconds would generate a new number, but now everybody has them on their phones, and then there's also these YubiKeys and some of the other USB devices. And so the way they work is they use it's essentially a random number generator, and no, it's not a random number generator. Sorry, there's a secret key that is known by the server and by the generator, and every 30 seconds it takes the timestamp plus the secret key and generates a hash of it, and then gives you part of that hash. And so, because of the nature of hashing algorithms, and you cannot predict it, you cannot reverse engineer it back to the key, and you cannot predict what the next one's going to be. So it makes it very secure. Was that right, Malcolm? Even though you're early in the morning for you probably still got a better explanation than I do.
No, that was fine. That was fine. I mean, two-factor. I mean, that's probably the gold standard or whatever of two-factor authentication. I mean, two-factor authentication can be as simple as getting a text message and having a code in that you reply to. But
yeah, yep.
Yeah, I mean you're about to launch me on a rant, because this is one of my bugbears, that passwords are ridiculous. We're essentially using a solution that was adequate back in the days when we had a time-sharing mainframe and all the terminals in the one room. At that point, passwords were up for the job, but they haven't really been since. And we've scaled them to this global network, which is essential to everything we do. And now we're surprised that they fail. That most people have one password for every system in their lives. And our solution to making them secure are forcing people to change them every 90 days. And what does everybody do? After 90 days, when your password was password, after 90 days it becomes password 1, and then 90 days after that it becomes password 2. And then we force them to put non-alphabetic characters in there, so they stick an exclamation mark on the end. Everyone does it, and it's fundamentally broken. So, yeah, I think that yes, two-factor authentication, because more and more people are going to demand it after they've been, just go to Have I Been Pwned and terrify yourself about how many data breaches you've already shown up in.
So I just saw this YouTube video where someone had gone to this exhibit where it was a pop-up exhibit on security, and they had these books they printed out from one of the data breaches. I think it was the LinkedIn data breach. They printed out all the passwords in alphabetical order, and so you just grab the book and turn to the page and look, there was your password that you thought was so totally secure, along with 5 other variations that are very similar to it. Yeah. And it's like, oh, yep, I've been pwned. So yeah, I agree. Passwords, I use two-factor authentication like everywhere I can. I use a password manager. We could totally just go off for hours talking about that for sure. So anyway, I did find, here's a session Olaf did in CodeRage 12 a couple years ago on two-factor authentication and single sign-on using Facebook and Google Authenticator. So you can check that out there.
Cool. What's this site you're on?
Oh, so this is
Embarcadero Academy.
Embarcadero Academy.
So Olaf's online with us, and we can do our.
Hold on, I clicked play on the video. So yeah, you can go out here and you can watch the replay and the Q&A from that, and then there's links for more information and stuff as well.
It's surprising how much gold there is in the previous CodeRage videos. It's a really common thing where I'm looking to how to do something, and one of the most useful answers comes up as somebody's CodeRage session from X years ago.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, one of the reasons I changed up the format this year is I was hoping, and actually we did it in some of the sessions, we got quite a few people involved, is to get more people involved in CodeRage and to produce, set videos, and instead of requiring the longer videos, to make it more flexible and get more people involved. And because I agree, it's great to have these nuggets of knowledge saved and available for everybody. So I will put this link in here I did already on, so you can get it. So if you're not familiar with Embarcadero Academy, you can go out here to embarcaderoacademy.com, and they have lots of courses, including CodeRage. All our past CodeRages are available on there for free. You can get those for free, and then we have some great bundles that you can get, or I'm saying we, but it's not we. I have courses on here I've built, but the Embarcadero Academy is a third-party site, partner site we work with, but a lot of great content on here you can check out. Question here, Al. Today, most is Rad Server based on Indy like DataSnap is?
No, not to my knowledge. I believe Rad Server we built from the ground up, just based on pure REST and JSON technology. So I don't think there's Indy part of Rad Server that I can recall. Well,
yeah, I don't think it. I believe you're right. I believe it uses the new native sockets that we have. This is what I was thinking of earlier, LDAP. So Rad Server can do LDAP, but that's not the same as OAuth 2. So yep, point taken. That's what I was trying to think of earlier though.
Yep, that's a good point. So Rad Server does have its own built-in, authentication and authorization. You can use its own built-in service for that, but you can also plug in outside authentication services like LDAP or Active Directory.
Yeah, Active Directory, that's the other one. So just so everybody knows, I just got over a cold, and then I'm not sure if it was like some cold medicine I took yesterday or what, but then I was up all night. So I'm not only getting over being sick, but I am going on, I don't know, 30-something odd hours without sleep right now. Let's see. Here's another question about Rad Server. Lots of questions about Rad Server today. Does Rad Server have a native JWT implemented? I'm trying to think what a JWT Java, isn't that like a Java technology? JWT, Java Web
Token, I think.
Yeah, Web Token.
Web token.
JSON Web Token, maybe. Okay, yeah, JSON Web Token. It has native. Yeah, so it does have JSON support built in, but I'm not sure if it's a web token. I'm not sure if it's specifically this web token, but it does have support for working with JSON. It actually makes it really easy for working with JSON and building up JSON things in there. And actually, if you take a look at Al's session there, I'm sure he goes into the
you can, with Rad Server, you can pass a token from session to session. So once you make your first connection and you establish that token, you can pass that token to subsequent sessions, so you don't have to continue to log in and authenticate yourself. So I do have a follow-up blog post on the Embarcadero blog site. So I'll add a part in there on how you can pass your token from session to session on a Rad Server session.
About GWT, I may mention that I used the library from Mr. Rossi. He's working with Marco Cantu, I think, and I implemented this in a recent product of a REST server and client. And also the ICS Overbyte socket suite has also GW2 and Jose, which is JWT with signing, Java object signing. So both ICS and the Rossi library can allow you to use GWT.
Okay, great. I've used ICS before. It's a great library.
Yes, they added about a new feature in their Open SSL library with about 22 very nice demos.
Fantastic. I should actually come out and look at this because I had someone just the other day was talking about the X509. I forgot about this. Yeah, that. And I'll share an embarrassing story. There have been a number of times that I have been trying to figure something out and Googling it and searching, and then I find a video I made or a webinar I did on it, and I'm like, wait, I knew how to do this once. So yeah, I'd forgotten about ICS, but they have X509 because I just assumed that I was asking about X509. So excellent. So there's another resource. So I'm not sure if the Rad Server has the JWT built in, but there are other solutions for you there as well. Ian says Rad Server is built on web broker and uses T-Page Producer.
What?
That's right, isn't it? Yeah, that's right, Al. Right?
Sounds correct. Yes.
It's gotten to the point it's hard to keep track of all the pieces and parts. So
is that right? Maybe you can use it, but we've done projects in Rad Server where we haven't touched T-Page Producer.
Right, and so that's the thing with Rad Server is because it's built up to that point, you don't have to worry about that lower level stuff because you're able to just use it as a turnkey system. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's built from the ground up. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the web broker bit. You know, that I can't really comment on. And it might even make sense that it is because you've got kind of similar choices in terms of you doing an Apache module or whatever else. So that part I don't know, but the T-Page Producer bit threw me a bit.
Oh, I have Delphi right here, so I'll open it up and try it. But while we do this, so the next question is here. Oh, and actually, back to the, I just remembered this, back to the question we had about two-factor authentication. So there is, in the enterprise connectors, a Twilio. Is that how you spell it? Twilio? Twilio. Have you used this one yet, Malcolm? The Twilio connector?
No, there's 100 and something of them, mate. I mean, I do love them, but there's a lot.
So there's a connector for this one. This one's kind of a unique service that's available, and they have really reasonable pricing. What they do is they provide the ability to send text messages or receive text messages. So programmable SMS is 3/4 of a cent to send or receive a message, US. If you pay as you go, or you can buy them in bulk, and there's lots of options around that. But so if you want to, for example, have your users log in and then send them a text message to their cell phone, and then have them type the number in they received, you can do that with the enterprise connectors and Twilio, and it's really affordable. So I will share a simple story about this. My dad is in a band, and he wanted a way for people to text him requests, but he didn't want to have to keep pulling out his phone and managing that way. And so he literally came over one afternoon, and we went out to Twilio, signed up for a free starter account, and used the enterprise connector and connected to it. And it was just so easy to get a list of all the incoming texts and display them on the screen, and then give him the ability to just tap on them and send a response back that says, "Oh, you're next in the queue," or "Well, thanks for the request," or what, just canned replies like that. And it literally just took me a couple hours to do that, put it all together, and then he threw $20 in his Twilio account, and he's been happy ever since. So if you want to send and receive text messages, as well as they do programmable voice and other things as well, but the text messages, I think, is probably the most useful features of it. This is a great way to go. So check out enterprise connectors and Twilio for that. A little aside there. What was the next question was, how can I send push notifications using Rad Server and Firebase? I know that's was a new feature that was added, right, Al?
Well, Google's push notification used to be called GCM, Google Cloud Messaging, and then they just changed it to something called Firebase. So now instead of using a Google GCM, we now use Firebase. So there is some good white papers and tutorials that show you how to use the new Google Firebase push notification with Rad Server. So I'll put those links in my blog post also.
Yeah, there's some. I see some information here, but I'll add that to his blog post. Can we use cryptography technology other than OpenSSL, like Insoft components, to create DataSnap clients? Yeah, you can do custom cryptography, right?
I recall with DataSnap. So DataSnap also has support for communication filters, where you can provide custom modifications to the raw stream of bytes that are exchanged between clients and servers. I'm going to say yes to that. that'll also be something good to add in my blog notes on how we can do that.
Yeah. Yep. Can I migrate a system which is using a Microsoft SQL Server to Rad Server without migrating the database to Interbase?
Well, the Interbase that comes with Rad Server is only used to store the authentication, the users, the groups, the passwords, and some simple JSON name value pairs. So nothing stops you from continuing to use your same Microsoft SQL Server database on the back end. You can easily add a FireDAC connection inside of a Rad Server data module that connects to your Microsoft SQL Server database and use it the same way you're using it now. But that's yeah, a lot of folks ask, can I replace the included Interbase database that comes with Rad Server with my own database like Firebird or Microsoft SQL Server? So it's not something that we don't recommend doing, because the Interbase database that comes with Rad Server is tightly bound to Rad Server to store the usernames and the passwords and the authentication that Rad Server itself uses.
Right. Yep. So yeah, exactly. The Interbase, you can use it with Interbase for the database, but the Interbase that's required is the Interbase for the username. So yeah, you don't have to. So you can keep using Microsoft SQL Server or whatever you're using. I tried DataSnap proxy generator with a relatively old build DataSnap REST server. It created methods with a _cache suffix. Why is that?
So those mobile connectors that you can get from DataSnap, those are all the helper classes that you can use with I forget the connectors. There's one for Java.
Right.
So those are all the helper classes you can use for other front-end mobile clients, like I think it was one for, let's say, Java particularly. So you have the helper classes for a Java application to connect to the backend DataSnap server, access the functions,
sure,
access the message, and return them. So all those files that get created are all the helper files that get created from that mobile connector wizard.
So it probably has something to do with the particular connector that it's connecting to. Okay, next question, Peter again. I like the easy way you can add a table to Rad Server with database endpoints. However, how do we change the single record return so that all records contain the key searched? At the moment, you only get the first record matching the search, but not all records matching the search. Yes, I can build an endpoint manually, but a tweak to the built-in service would be fabulous. So that's the new table endpoints feature in Rad Server.
Correct. So that new database endpoint wizard will return all the records back from the database, and there's a page option that you can add to say only return like the first row, or the first 5 rows, or the first 10 rows. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's what the new.
But I think he's saying if you could match all records matching a search. I guess that's what it's going to do right by default, right? If you do all rows, it's going to be all rows that match a search criteria.
If the query is specific to select asterisk from customer, where customers annual max gross revenue is $500 million, only those records will get returned. And maybe if you could send us a specific example of what you're trying to do, we can offer suggestions on how to do it.
Yeah. Are there any plans to change DataSnap server components to use HTTPS on Windows instead of Indy sockets? Oh, HTTP sys. Do you know on that, Al?
So I do not know, but good question for the product managers to ask, and we'll get you an answer.
Yeah. So you can put that in as a feature request, certainly at quality.embarcadero.com. This is the way to put in your feature requests as well as bug reports, and you can go in here and put those in, and product management does look at that. record search option built. So Peter says there is a record search option built into the endpoint. And so Peter, if you probably need to follow up with Al for specifics, and he can maybe help you with putting something together on that, but or figuring that out. Okay, so it is almost top of the hour here, and I do unfortunately have another. Today's just been a crazy day. Okay, so if you want to catch the replay, I will put the link in here again for this. This is the playlist that oh, okay, I see what you're saying now, Peter. This is the playlist though that has all the videos, CodeRage sessions videos on it, and this replay will be added to the top of this list. So if you are in the future watching the replay, it will be right here at the top. Right now it's not because we're recording it right now, but later today it'll be there. So Al, Peter expanded on it. He said if you have like a localhost :80/client/list/1017, if instead of just returning the one record that matches 1017, how would you return all the records that match 1017? Now I believe, see, REST is one of those things that's kind of squishy, but usually 1017 means I want a specific item, not all items. Am I missing something there, Al, or?
As Peter follows up on, he only wants to return one record, so instead of doing a get, becomes a get item, where you pass in that one, let's call it the client number 1017. Instead of doing the get, you're going to do the get item instead. And that'll only return the one record where the client's number is equal to 1017. That's the implementation of the get item endpoint and not the get.
Okay, so get item instead of get. Okay, I had it backwards in my mind, so thank you for explaining that. Okay.
I blame it on your cold medicine, Jim.
It's one of those things, I don't know if it's the cold medicine or the lack of sleep at this point. But hey, it's entertaining. One thing, there's a couple of other things on here. One of these particular is this Rad Server with David I session video, and he has a book that's available here as well, the complete guide to Rad Server ebook. So I will put the link in here for this in the chat session. If you are on Update subscription, you have access to that. Oh, so Peter says he wants all records that match 1017. So then you'd be get items, right? Anyway, so Peter, if you follow up with Al, he can get this figured out later.
Correct.
So yeah, I just put the link in there for the complete guide to Rad Server ebook. This is a really extensive ebook that David I put together. So if you want more information on Rad Server, definitely check that out. As well as
sorry, Jim, to interrupt, but just the other gem in that book is actually a photo of David I in a suit. So if people have never seen him out of his tie-dye shirts, he's actually in the suit jacket and tie. So that's worth it. That's worth the price of admission just for that.
Yeah, it's free download. So yeah, go download that right now.
Worth every cent.
Absolutely. I would like to customize the dashboard generated by Rad Server. I know that that's supported, but it's not something I've looked into yet. I believe it's in the doc wiki though, but let me see if I can find it on that. Do you know anything about how to customize the dashboard in Rad Server, Al?
So yeah, I believe we give you the source code for the dashboard, so you should be able to have access to the source code and customize it any way you want.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, it's all in there so you can customize it. I think there's a CodeRage or webinar or something like that on that as well, but I don't recall the details offhand. So.
And the most recent versions, we changed the console. Now we use our own Sencha web framework for the front end web client. So you should be able to find the source code for the JavaScript and the HTML that we use for the web console now. I'll add that to my blog post also.
Awesome. Great, thank you, Al. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this today. Especially thank you to our presenters that put together the sessions for us and came online. Especially Malcolm, I know it's the middle of the night for you, early morning. So thank you for joining, and really appreciate that. And thank you, of course, for all of our attendees that are on here with your questions and your comments, and hopefully got some useful content out of this conversation around client-server technologies with Delphi. And we will. So I should have put a slide in here. Next week is Fast C++. So if you're a C++ developer, we didn't forget you. We have content coming next week on that as well. Anything, let's go around real quick for everybody. Anything you want to add? Felix, real quick before we go.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted, any closing comments that you didn't get a chance to mention earlier before we go.
No, nothing special. I was thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. Danny, I didn't get a chance to hear from you very much, unfortunately. Lots of great videos for you to go watch, but anything you want to add real quick before we go?
No, just have a nice holidays, and that's it.
Yeah, I found out actually a couple people are on holiday already, so December is always tricky. I seriously consider just skipping it altogether. So yes, everybody enjoy your holidays. Mal, anything real quick before we go?
No, it's always a pleasure, especially to hear the dulcet tones of Al Mannarino. So I've enjoyed myself.
Awesome, great, thanks. And Al, how about any closing comments before we wrap this session up?
I'll just say, you know, both Delphi and C++ Builder have those great three technologies to build those multi-tier, middle-tier solutions, you know, DataSnap, Rad Server, and Web Broker. So if you haven't looked at them yet, you know, take a look at them. So if you have any need for web server, middle tier, or any type of middle tier solution, you know, they're very powerful and very rich frameworks for creating these multi-tier solutions.
Yep, absolutely. Great. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and you will receive an email with the link to the replay along with the playlist again, so you can go back and watch a video that maybe you didn't realize how amazing it was yet, or that you just didn't get to yet, and maybe you need to see again, and as well as the replay for this session. And appreciate everybody being here and for all your questions, and thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day and happy holidays.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.